What if a simple act of kindness changed everything? Imagine paying for someone's coffee only to discover they're a billionaire with a secret mission. Would you still help? This is the story of a waitress who unknowingly changed a life, and yours could be next. Stay tuned to see how one small gesture leads to a life-altering decision. You won't believe the twist. The rain was a steady rhythm against the windows of the small cafe nestled in the heart of Manhattan. The city was alive, bustling, and full of the usual noise, yet inside the warm confines of this little cafe, there was a calm that welcomed patrons seeking shelter from the dreary weather. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the earthy smell of wet pavement, creating an atmosphere that felt like a hug, comforting, familiar, and safe. Sophia wiped down a table near the window, the soft glow from the lights above casting a gentle reflection on the polished surface. She had worked the morning shift at this cozy spot for the past 2 years. The hours were long, the pay modest, but she had always believed in the power of small acts of kindness. With her auburn hair pulled back into a neat ponytail, she had perfected the art of quiet service. A smile here, a quick chat there. It wasn't much, but it was her way of making people feel seen. Her life hadn't been easy, but she had learned early on to find beauty in the simplest moments. She lived in a small, cramped apartment with her younger sister Lily, and while their lives were far from glamorous, they had each other. Sophia had often thought that was all she needed. That was until she met Mr. Harrison. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and Sophia looked up. In walked a man who seemed to have stepped out of time. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, his salt and pepper hair damp from the rain that clung to his coat like a second skin. His coat was threadbare, his shoes scuffed with wear, and he moved with a hesitancy that made it clear he wasn't used to asking for help. Sophia couldn't help but notice the weariness in his eyes that seemed to have seen more than their fair share of hardships. He approached the counter with a quiet shuffle, his gaze flickering over the menu, uncertain of what to choose. He glanced up at the young barista James, who stood with his arms crossed and a smirk playing on his lips. "What can I get for you?" James asked, his tone bordering on dismissive. "A simple black coffee," the old man murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. As James began to ring up the order, Mr. Harrison reached into his pockets, his fingers fumbling as he searched for his wallet, his brow furrowed with growing frustration. He shifted nervously, his face paling slightly, and swallowed hard before speaking again. I'm so sorry. I must have left my wallet at home," he said, his voice now tinged with embarrassment. "If it's all right, could I just sit here for a while until the rain lets up? I can wait for the next train." Sophia could feel the discomfort radiating from him. He wasn't asking for a free drink. He was simply looking for a moment of peace, a place to wait out the storm. But the cafe wasn't exactly known for its generosity, and James's response was swift and sharp. "Look, buddy," James said loudly, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of conversation. "This isn't a shelter. We don't give out freebies to folks who can't pay. If you don't have money, you can't stay." The words were harsh, and the cafe fell silent for a moment as a few heads turned. The old man's cheeks flushed crimson, his eyes darting to the floor in shame. He took a small step back, his shoulders slumping as the weight of humiliation pressed down on him. "I wasn't asking for a free drink," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "I just need a place to stay dry for a bit." A snide laugh came from a nearby table where a group of well-dressed patrons sat, watching the scene unfold. "Imagine that," one of them sneered. "Coming into a cafe without a dime and expecting to be served. Some people have no shame." Another chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. "Times must be tough if beggars are now aspiring to be cafe connoisseurs." Sophia's heart sank as she watched the old man, his shoulders hunched, turned towards the door. The scorn of the other patrons was too much for him to bear, and with a defeated sigh, he shuffled toward the exit. The scene left a sour taste in the air, but before anyone could speak further, Sophia made her decision. She had seen enough. Without hesitation, she grabbed her tray and made her way to the counter, her gaze locking with the man's for just a moment. She placed her tray down with a firm clatter, catching James's attention. "I'll cover his coffee," she said, her voice steady, cutting through the murmurs that had begun to rise around the room. James scoffed, his smirk faltering. "Emma, what are you doing? You don't have to pay for him. He can't just come in here and expect handouts." Sophia turned to face him, her eyes unyielding. "I'm covering his coffee," she stated, not out of pity, but because she knew what it was like to be judged for not having enough. She had spent years in the shadow of judgment, always feeling like she had to prove her worth. A derisive laugh came from the corner of the room. "How noble," a man jeered. "A waitress playing the hero. Maybe you're hoping for a tip from him later?" Sophia's gaze swept over the room, her posture straightening as she turned to face the others. "Kindness isn't a transaction," she said clearly, her voice resonant with conviction. "It doesn't diminish us to show compassion, but belittling others? That reveals true smallness." The cafe fell silent. The earlier undercurrent of mockery seemed to dissipate, replaced by a palpable sense of introspection. Sophia turned back to Mr. Harrison, offering him a gentle smile. "Please have a seat," she said softly. "I'll bring your coffee over shortly." The man hesitated for a moment, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He nodded, grateful, and slowly made his way to an empty seat by the window where the rain continued to cascade down the glass. Sophia watched him for a moment before she turned back to her work, a quiet sense of pride blossoming in her chest. As she prepared his coffee, the atmosphere in the cafe shifted. The patrons who moments ago had mocked the old man now avoided, meeting her gaze. The air felt heavier, filled with a kind of subdued contemplation. Sophia knew she had made the right choice, even if it wasn't the popular one. Her small act of kindness had not only given the old man a moment of dignity, but had also reminded her that kindness, even in the face of judgment, was never a weakness. The morning shift dragged on as Sophia moved between tables, offering polite smiles and taking orders. The usual rhythm of the cafe returned, but there was an undercurrent of tension now. The previous incident with Mr. Harrison lingered in the air like an echo that couldn't be shaken off. She felt the eyes of the other customers on her, some filled with curiosity, others with judgment. The clock ticked away as the rain outside began to ease, but Sophia's thoughts kept drifting back to the old man by the window. There was something about him, something in his eyes, that made her want to understand his story. She had seen many people walk in and out of the cafe, but he was different. It wasn't just that he had no money or that he had been embarrassed, it was the way he had carried himself, the subtle sadness that seemed to hang around him. Sophia had been there herself too many times to count, feeling invisible, judged by a world that often didn't take the time to see the person behind the face. Her mind wandered to the last conversation she'd had with her sister Lily, the night before. Lily, who always seemed so strong despite everything they'd been through. They didn't talk about it often, but Sophia knew that Lily felt the weight of their situation, the cramped apartment, the struggles to make ends meet, the dreams that seemed to grow further out of reach each day. Lily never complained, but Sophia could tell how much it hurt her. And yet, even through all the hardships, Lily had a warmth and understanding about the world. It was the same warmth that Sophia had tried to offer in small doses every day, whether to her customers or to the strangers who crossed her path. But today, that warmth felt harder to hold on to. As she carried a fresh cup of coffee to another table, she caught a glimpse of Mr. Harrison still sitting by the window. His posture had straightened, and his hands no longer trembled as he carefully sipped the coffee she had paid for. He seemed lost in thought, gazing out at the rainy streets beyond the glass. The soft click of her heels echoed as she approached, and he looked up when he noticed her. "I didn't expect this," he said quietly, his voice low but warm, as if he hadn't spoken in a long time. Sophia smiled and took a seat across from him, feeling an odd pull to sit with him. "Sometimes we don't expect the good things to happen, but they do." He nodded slowly, his tired eyes studying her. "You know, I've spent most of my life looking for answers in the wrong places. I've spent so much time building things, accumulating things, but I lost something along the way, something much more valuable than any of it." Sophia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What was it?" "Connection," he said softly. "Genuine human connection. I've been surrounded by people my entire life, but I've never felt truly seen. Not until you walked up to me today." Sophia's heart twisted with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. "I don't understand," she admitted. "I just paid for your coffee." It was a simple thing. He smiled faintly, a small, knowing smile. "It was more than that. You didn't just give me a cup of coffee. You gave me something I've been searching for. You treated me like a human being, not as a nuisance or a problem. You didn't judge me based on my appearance or my lack of money. And that's something rare." Sophia felt her breath catch in her chest. The simplicity of the moment hit her harder than she had expected. She had done something so small, so simple. But to him, it had been a lifeline. In a world where appearances were everything, where people were often judged by what they wore, how much they had, and where they came from, Sophia had chosen to show compassion without asking for anything in return. "I don't know why, but I'm glad you came in today," Mr. Harrison said after a long pause. "I've been to a lot of places looking for something, and I think I found it here." Sophia blinked, taken aback by his words. "Found what?" "Hope," he said simply, his eyes glinting with something deeper now. "Hope that there are still people in this world who care, who are willing to show kindness, even when there's no reason to." Sophia didn't know how to respond. She had always believed in kindness, but she had never thought of it as a beacon of hope. And yet in that moment she saw the truth of his words. In a world where people often overlooked the little acts of goodness, where greed and self-interest seemed to rule, she had shown something different. And that had made a difference. Not just to him, but to herself as well. As the rain began to taper off, Mr. Harrison stood up slowly, adjusting his coat. "I should be going," he said, his voice no longer filled with hesitation. "But I want to thank you, Sophia. You've reminded me of something I lost a long time ago, and for that I'll always be grateful." Sophia watched him for a moment, feeling a lump form in her throat. "It was nothing really," she said, trying to deflect the emotions bubbling up inside her. I just wanted to help." Mr. Harrison smiled at her, his eyes softening. "No, it was everything. I hope you never forget that." With that, he left the cafe, disappearing into the streets of Manhattan, leaving Sophia standing there, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a promise. She returned to her work, but her mind was racing. The world was full of so much noise, so much judgment. But in that small, quiet moment, she had learned something she had never known before. Kindness wasn't just about making someone else feel better. It was about making the world feel a little bit more human again. As the hours passed and the rain continued to fade away, Sophia felt a new sense of purpose stir within her. She knew that no matter what else happened in her life, she would continue to offer the same compassion, the same warmth to everyone she met. Because sometimes a simple cup of coffee was all it took to change someone's day, or maybe even their life. And in that, she had found something that would last far longer than any material thing. A connection. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a soft golden hue over the streets of Manhattan. Sophia arrived at the cafe early, as she always did. Her shift was routine, the hours filled with the usual ebb and flow of customers, the hurried business, people grabbing their morning cup of coffee, the elderly couples chatting over croissants, and the young professionals glued to their laptops. But no matter how many familiar faces passed through the door, her mind kept drifting back to the old man, Mr. Harrison, and their conversation the day before. She had thought about him throughout the night, replaying his words over and over in her mind. Hope, kindness, connection. What had he meant by that? Why did he leave such a profound mark on her heart with just a few words? She had been kind, sure, but wasn't that what everyone was supposed to do? Yet somehow he had seen something deeper, something she hadn't even realized herself. Sophia moved through her duties, wiping down tables and refilling sugar bowls, but the thought of Mr. Harrison lingered in the back of her mind. What had truly brought him to that cafe? And why had he seemed so different from the other regulars she served each day? There was more to him than the threadbare coat and wrinkled face. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important she hadn't yet understood. Around noon, the cafe door swung open, and the bell above it jingled, signaling the arrival of a new customer. At first, Sophia didn't think much of it. Another person seeking warmth from the chill of the outside world. But then, her gaze lifted, and her breath caught in her throat. It was him, but not the man she had met yesterday. The man who walked into the cafe now was dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his hair neatly combed, his face clean-shaven and sharp. He moved with confidence, his polished shoes clicking against the floor as he walked with purpose, making his way toward an empty table by the window, the same spot where he had sat the day before. Sophia froze for a moment, her mind racing. This can't be the same person, can it? But it was. There was no mistaking the way his eyes held that same quiet intensity, that depth she had sensed the day before. The man she had thought was an ordinary, struggling elderly man was now someone entirely different. Her heart raced as she walked over to his table, her curiosity piqued, but also a strange sense of wariness creeping into her chest. She had no idea what this could mean, but something told her that this encounter would be like nothing she had experienced before. As she approached, the man looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a familiarity that took her by surprise. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he broke the silence. "Good morning, Sophia," he said softly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Sophia blinked, thrown off guard. You remember my name?" she asked, her voice betraying her confusion. The man nodded. "Of course. You made a strong impression on me yesterday. I didn't forget." Sophia didn't know whether to feel flattered or uneasy. She forced a smile, trying to keep her composure. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "No," he replied with a quiet chuckle. "I suppose I owe you an explanation." Sophia's brows furrowed, a sense of unease settling over her. "Explanation? For what?" He leaned back slightly in his chair, his demeanor calm but carrying, a weight that made Sophia feel like she was standing on the edge of something monumental. "Yesterday you met me in a guise. The truth is I'm not who I appeared to be." Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" He sighed as though preparing to unveil a truth that had been hidden for too long. "I wasn't just some elderly man struggling to make ends meet. I am Charles Everly, the founder of Everly Enterprises. I'm a businessman, a billionaire." Sophia's jaw tightened as she absorbed his words. She stared at him, her mind racing but unable to grasp what he was saying. The man she had helped, the man who had made her feel something deeper than she had in a long time, was the same man who could change the lives of many with a single decision. The billionaire. He seemed to sense her shock and confusion. "I understand that this may be a lot to take in, but I wanted to explain myself. I didn't approach you yesterday as a billionaire or as a man of power. I came in to see if there was still real kindness in the world. If I could find something genuine." Sophia's head spun. She had given him kindness not because of who he was, but because she had simply seen a man in need. And now he was telling her that he had been testing her? That her act of generosity had been part of some kind of test? "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why would you do that? Why pretend to be someone you're not?" Charles's expression softened. "Because I've spent many years surrounded by people who only wanted something from me. People who were always looking for what I could give them. Money, status, connections. But I wanted to see if there were still people out there who could show compassion without expecting anything in return. I wanted to see if kindness still existed, free from ulterior motives." Sophia felt a pang in her chest. She had been part of that kindness. She hadn't been looking for anything from him, and yet here he was, a man who could buy anything, telling her that what she had done was rare. "I never asked for anything from you," she whispered, feeling a mix of emotions rising within her. "I just wanted to help." "I know," he said, his voice gentle. "And that's what makes you different. That's what makes you rare." Sophia felt the weight of his words sink deep into her soul. A part of her wanted to feel angry, to feel betrayed, but another part of her understood. He hadn't used her kindness for any personal gain. He had come to her because he wanted to know if there were people who still cared. Not for his money, not for his connections, but simply because they saw another human being in need. "I never expected this," she said softly, her gaze falling to the table between them. "I don't know what to say." Charles studied her for a moment before speaking again. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know the truth." The conversation lingered between them, charged with a mixture of uncertainty and understanding. Charles Everly, a man of immense wealth and power, had sought out kindness in its purest form, and he had found it in the most unexpected of places, in a small cafe, with a waitress who had simply offered him a cup of coffee. "I didn't come here to make you feel uncomfortable," Charles said, his voice quieter now. "I came to ask you a question, one that's been weighing on me since yesterday. Would you consider having dinner with me? I'd like to understand what drives you. I want to learn from you." Sophia hesitated, unsure of what to say. Dinner with a billionaire? Was this some kind of game? Or was it an opportunity for something deeper, something real? After a long pause, she nodded slowly. "I'll consider it," she said quietly. "But I'm not sure what this will mean." Charles gave her a warm smile, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. I'm not offering you anything except a conversation. No expectations, just an honest exchange between two people. Sophia couldn't help but wonder what this encounter would lead to. But for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was standing at the edge of something meaningful. Something that wasn't defined by wealth or status, but by connection, and she was ready to see where it would take her. The morning. After their conversation, Sophia woke up to a sense of quiet anticipation. The weight of what Charles had shared with her, the revelation of his true identity, continued to linger in her mind. It wasn't just the fact that he was a billionaire. It was the sincerity in his words that had caught her off guard. He wasn't offering her wealth or a life of luxury. He wasn't trying to buy her kindness. He simply wanted to know her, to understand the motivations behind her actions, and to connect with someone who had given him something priceless, genuine human kindness. As she arrived for her shift, her thoughts kept drifting back to the offer he had made, dinner. It seemed so surreal. Dinner with Charles Everly, the man who had built an empire, yet felt as though he had lost something essential along the way. Real connection. She had agreed, albeit hesitantly. What could she possibly bring to the table that someone like him would find valuable? The cafe was quiet that afternoon, and as Sophia wiped down the counter, she allowed herself a moment to reflect. What was this really about? Was it simply about a billionaire looking for answers, or was there something more at play? She didn't know, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't go into this meeting pretending to be someone she wasn't. That evening, she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the hem of her simple dress, the only nice outfit she had. She didn't own anything extravagant, no designer heels or fancy accessories. But what she did have was her authenticity, the same authenticity that had made her stand out in the cafe the day before. That, she told herself, would be enough. She arrived at the upscale restaurant in the heart of the city, its glass facade gleaming in the fading light of dusk. It felt like stepping into another world. The doorman greeted her with a polite nod as she entered, and the ambience was entirely different from the familiar warmth of the cafe. The white tablecloths, crystal chandeliers, and the hum of elegant conversations created an air of sophistication that made Sophia feel like an imposter. She wasn't used to this kind of world, the kind that could easily overwhelm her. The maitre d' led her to a secluded corner of the restaurant, where Charles was already seated, his posture relaxed, his eyes glinting with a mixture of patience and curiosity. He looked every bit the billionaire, composed, confident, and effortlessly charming. Yet there was something else in his gaze, something softer than his usual public persona. It was as if he was waiting, not for her to impress him, but for something more. "Sophia," he said as she approached, standing up to greet her. "I'm glad you came." "Thank you for inviting me," she replied, forcing a smile, though she couldn't quite shake the nervousness that lingered in her chest. As they sat down, the waiter placed menus in front of them, but neither of them immediately glanced at them. Instead, Charles leaned forward, his eyes focused intently on her. "I want to make one thing clear before we go any further," he said, his voice low. "This dinner isn't about me trying to get something from you. I'm not interested in making you my charity case or giving you a check in exchange for your kindness. I just want to learn about you. What makes you tick? Why you do the things you do?" Sophia blinked, her heart racing. She hadn't expected such honesty. For a billionaire to say he wasn't interested in offering her money or status was, well, it was unexpected. "I don't know what you expect to hear," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "I'm just a waitress. I do my job, I try to be kind to people, and I take care of my sister. That's it." Charles nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I don't think you understand what I mean. It's not about the job or your sister or any of the external things. It's about what drives you, the core of who you are. You helped me when I least expected it, when I was in a position I rarely find myself in, vulnerable, unseen. And you treated me with the same dignity as you would any other customer. That's not something I come across every day." Sophia swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. She hadn't thought about it like that. She hadn't been trying to prove anything to him. She had simply acted out of instinct. An instinct that told her to help someone in need, no matter their appearance or social standing. "You think that's rare?" she asked quietly, unsure if she fully understood his point. "Absolutely," Charles replied. "Most people would have dismissed me, given the way I looked. They would have assumed I was just another homeless man asking for a handout. But you didn't. You didn't judge me. You just offered kindness, And that's something I can't buy with all the money in the world. There was a long silence as Sophia processed his words. A part of her wanted to ask why he had been testing her in the first place, but she didn't want to press him too hard. Instead, she focused on the quiet sincerity in his eyes. It was the same sincerity she had seen when he first revealed his identity. "I didn't think it was a big deal," she said, her voice soft. "I just thought, if I can help, then I will. I didn't expect anything in return. It was just the right thing to do." Charles looked at her with newfound respect. "And that's exactly why I wanted to meet you. You're different from the people I usually come into contact with. You have something that money can't buy." As they continued to talk, the conversation shifted from the initial awkwardness to a more relaxed flow. They talked about books, art, and life in the city. Charles opened up about the pain of losing his wife and how it had changed his perspective on life and relationships. He spoke of the loneliness that came with wealth and the way people treated him differently when they learned who he was. "I've traveled to many places, met so many people, but it always feels like I'm looking for something," Charles admitted. "I've built an empire, but I've never built something that truly matters. I've always been surrounded by people who want something from me. And I've been questioning lately whether anyone would care if I just disappeared. If I stopped being Charles Everly, the businessman, the billionaire." Sophia listened intently, moved by his vulnerability. She hadn't expected him to open up like this, to share the depth of his inner conflict. She realized then that even someone like Charles, with all his wealth, still carried the weight of loneliness and longing. "I don't think it's about disappearing," she said quietly, after a long pause. "I think it's about being seen for who you truly are, not just the persona that people have created for you." Charles met her gaze, and for a moment, there was an unspoken understanding between them. He nodded slowly, as though her words had pierced through the layers he had built around himself. "I want to offer you something," he said, breaking the silence. "I can't offer you wealth or luxury. You already have something much more valuable than that. But I want to help you help your cause. I want to start a foundation in your name. The Sophia Bennett Foundation. A place for people like you who don't have the means but have the heart. People who need a hand, not just in terms of money, but in connection. I want to create something that will make a real difference." Sophia sat there stunned. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't even considered it. She had just been trying to survive, to help others in the small ways she could. But now, Charles was offering her a chance to build something much bigger, a legacy of kindness. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her mind spinning. "This is more than I ever imagined." Charles smiled softly. "You don't have to say anything now. But think about it. You don't have to accept right away. I just want to help you create something that will last." As the night wore on, Sophia realized something profound. It wasn't the money or the recognition that mattered most. What mattered was the opportunity to make a difference. And for the first time, she felt like someone truly saw her. Not just as a waitress, not just as a woman struggling to make ends meet, but as someone with potential, with the ability to change the world. One act of kindness at a time. The days following the dinner with Charles Everly felt like a whirlwind for Sophia. She couldn't quite wrap her mind around everything that had happened. A billionaire, a man who had everything money could buy, had seen something in her, something she hadn't seen in herself before. The offer to create a foundation in her name, to build something meaningful and lasting for those who were overlooked by society, was overwhelming. As much as she tried to go back to her routine at the cafe, everything had shifted. The baristas, who once barely acknowledged her, now seemed to watch her with a new curiosity. The customers who would normally sit and chat with her now greeted her with a mixture of surprise and admiration. She could feel the whispers, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. The foundation Charles had proposed was a massive opportunity, but it wasn't the kind of thing she could decide on overnight. She had always been someone who took each day as it came, and now she was faced with a life-changing decision that felt both like a blessing and a burden. Sophia spent long hours thinking about it. She met with Charles a few more times, always in quiet, understated places. They talked about the details of the foundation, how it would support people who needed help finding their footing, not just financially, but emotionally and socially. It would focus on offering mentorship, providing safe spaces for those who felt invisible, and most importantly, it would offer a sense of dignity to people who were constantly judged by their appearances or their circumstances. But despite the opportunity, Despite the good it could do, there was still something inside Sofia that held her back. She wasn't sure she was ready to step into the spotlight, to take on the responsibility of running something as big as a foundation. She had spent her whole life living under the radar, unnoticed by most, but still managing to do good in her own small way. Could she really make the jump from waitress to philanthropist? As the days passed, Sofia grew more and more uncertain. She would sit by her small kitchen window in the evenings, staring out at the city lights, wondering if she was making a mistake. Her sister Lily, ever the calm voice of reason, could see the worry etched on her face. One evening, as they sat together in their cramped apartment, Lily looked at her sister and spoke the words that would change everything. "Are you afraid of failing?" Lily asked gently, her eyes steady on Sofia's face. Sofia shook her head. "No, I'm afraid of being something I'm not. I've always been just me, a waitress, a sister. I never thought of myself as someone who could build something, like this, like a foundation. It feels like too much." Lily smiled softly and put a hand on her sister's. "I don't think it's about being someone you're not. You've already shown who you are, Sofia. You've always helped people, even when you didn't have anything to give. You've always seen people who others ignore. That's the kind of person you are, someone who lifts others up. You don't need to change for this. You just need to believe that you can make a difference." Sofia felt a weight lift off her shoulders as Lily's words sank in. Maybe Lily was right. Maybe it wasn't about stepping into someone else's shoes, but about using the strength she already had to make a bigger impact. She didn't need to be a billionaire to create something meaningful. She just needed to keep being herself. The decision wasn't easy, but it became clearer with each passing day. Sofia thought about the people she had helped over the years, the small acts of kindness that had made someone's day a little better, a little easier. She thought about the cafe, her sanctuary, the place where she had met Charles, the place that had taught her that kindness could be transformative. And so, after days of contemplation, Sofia made her decision. She called Charles to meet at the same cafe where they had first met, and when she walked in, she found him waiting by the window. "Sofia," he said with a welcoming smile, standing up as she approached. "I'm glad you came." "I've made my decision," she said, taking a deep breath, her heart racing. "I want to move forward with the foundation. But I want it to be mine, not just a legacy you created for me. I'll need guidance, of course, but I want to make the decisions. I want it to reflect who I am, not just who you think I am." Charles's eyes softened with pride. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. This isn't about me or my money. It's about you. You've always had the power to make a difference, and I want to help you do that in your own way. We'll build this together, but it will be yours. You have my full support." Sofia felt a wave of relief wash over her. This was the right decision. It wasn't about wealth or status. It was about building something from the ground up, creating a space where people could feel seen and valued, just like she had made that man feel seen when she had paid for his coffee. It wasn't about asking for anything in return, but about making the world a little kinder, one act at a time. As they began to discuss the plans, the future seemed brighter than it had in a long time. The foundation was taking shape, but so was something deeper. A friendship between two people from very different worlds, united by a shared desire to help others. Charles had offered her an opportunity, but she had taken it on her own terms. She had found the courage to step forward, to embrace a path that felt authentic, and to use her voice, not as someone who was seeking approval, but as someone who had already proven that her worth was not defined by what she had or didn't have. In the weeks that followed, the foundation began to grow, with Sofia at the helm. She kept working at the cafe, refusing to give up the job that had taught her so much about life and people. She poured her heart into her work with the foundation, and soon it began to thrive. Donations came in from all over, and more people reached out to get involved. But it wasn't just the money that mattered. What mattered most was the relationships she built, the people she helped, and the difference she made in their lives. The cafe, once just a place where she worked, now felt like a part of her legacy. It was where it all began, where a simple act of kindness had changed everything. And it wasn't just the foundation that had changed her life. It was the realization that she didn't have to be anyone else but herself. She could be both. The waitress who brought warmth to a cold city, and the leader who made the world a little kinder, a little more compassionate. And, as the days turned into months and the months into years, Sophia knew that the real journey wasn't about what she had accomplished, but about how she had chosen to walk through life. With an open heart, a kind spirit, and a belief that kindness, no matter how small, could change the world. In the end, what do you think about Sophia's journey? Do you believe that kindness can truly change lives, even in the most unexpected ways? Share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Let's start a conversation and hear from everyone. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep creating more inspiring content. Thank you for being a part of this journey.